What's up, fellas? For a special edition for the Blind Pig, courtesy of bgobsession.com, with the collab from our boys, the Burgundy and Gold Knuckleheads. John and I were lucky enough to meet these gentlemen at the opening game, at the home opener, under the first game without Dan Snyder in 25 freaking years, and hung out at the tailgate. Got to watch Washington win the only home game that they won in 2023. So that was, you know, kind of depressing to think about now. This was further, but it was all bright and shiny when we were hanging out in the tailgate, hanging out before the game. So we were lucky enough to meet these guys. Before we get going, I will throw it to you guys to say if you want to intro a little bit. Where can they find you on socials? Anybody who might be listening, if they want to find you on Twitter. Reggie, if you want to kick it off, be interested in hearing what you got to say.
Yeah, man. Thanks, Derek. But yeah, man, we, for our listeners, they know that we are located out in the Dallas area. So we're actually in enemy territory here with the Dallas Cowboys. And so Ken and I try to get to a few, every game for us is an away game. So even a home game at FedEx Field is an away game for us. And so we like to travel to a couple games throughout the year. And so we were like, we had to be in the building for the first game post Dan Snyder. And so of course we flew out to DC and was there. And of course we ran into you guys, got to hang out, and man, these guys were very welcoming to us and welcomed us with open arms, fed us, gave us a little something to drink, and we had a good time. But I did not know until you said that was the only home game that they won. I hadn't connected the dots on that because we did win week 1. But man, for you to say that was the only home game we won is a little depressing.
Yeah, we should have known because that was not an easy win. It was in question for most of the game whether we were going to win. And that was a game that like everyone knew we could not lose that game. We had to win.
Right. But yeah, you're right. And but I think for myself and a lot of us, we thought, well, it was Sam's first game. Everything was new, with the quarterback and everything. But we did struggle to win the game, but we won. And I think we were all happy, was thinking there's more to come. We only can go up from here.
And new offensive coordinator, right?
Yep.
Bringing in Eric Bieniemy's system. You thought, it wasn't a great game. Any win is a win, but there was a lot of new in week 1. New ownership, new quarterback, new offensive coordinator. You walked away with a win. The rain kind of held off. We were expecting a lot of rain, and for a while all of a sudden it was sunny and warm and everything, and walked away with a win. Man, it was a good day to start the season. It was a real good day to start the season.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
Now that we can officially say that is in the past, I am curious to hear, because John and I are on the board a lot and we go back and forth, and the board's been buzzing obviously over the last few days. But I am curious to hear what your guys' initial reaction is. First, Adam Peters. How do you guys feel about Peters?
Ken, go for it.
Yeah, I think it was time will tell how everything works out. But on the surface, when you first hear it, that's a home run, right? He was a hot commodity GM, and I think while we talk about Adam Peters, I think we kind of step back and talk about Josh Harris and team on how they've handled everything. I think pretty much since they have come along, they have consistently done things the right way that we want as fans to see ownership take hold of. He recognized, to his credit, that he's a new football guy, right? He's a fan, but from an ownership, he's a new football guy, and he brought some guys in to help him through the process. He was smart enough to know that he didn't know everything, right? The previous ownership thought he knew everything.
Right.
And so I got to give Josh Harris credit on doing what it took to do his due diligence to go get Adam Peters, recognize it and pull him in. So I was real happy. That was a great way to start out, and I'm glad he went and got a GM as opposed to getting a coach and then trying to get a GM to fit in. They're going about this the right way. The ownership group is pairing up, getting a GM, and together they're going forward and getting the coaching staff. And I'm sure this will trickle down into the free agency and draft as we talk about that.
And I think the other thing, just to throw it out there about Harris, is in stark contrast to the previous guy, whose name I try not to mention. He's not impulsive. And I think the one thing, even though I think a lot of fans would have enjoyed seeing Ron Rivera get canned, like, I don't know, maybe after the Cleveland game or somewhere in there, he didn't do that. And when he was asked about that, he's like, I didn't see any benefit to doing it. Like, it wasn't going to help the guys on the team. It wasn't going to help us. So I didn't do that. And I think he's shown that. He didn't immediately announce as soon as our season was over who the next head coach was, or who there was a process, and it might be a frustrating process for, rabid fans who want to know everything yesterday, but he's just not that impulsive knee jerk. I don't think he's ever going to do anything to appease fans, just to appease fans. He's going to do what he thinks is right and what his group thinks is right.
Well, and just one other thing, I don't know if you guys, obviously I'm the only one local to the DC area, but Rick Snyder was on 106.7 today, and he came out and said that there were literally times that Ron Rivera was coming to work after chemo, and they had to carry him in the back door of the building to get him into his office. So you can imagine, I mean, when we're watching it, if Harris is watching a guy battle that, as he's taking over ownership, the last thing he wants to do is be a little knee jerk or a little, sacrificial lamb of somebody who's putting up with that. So I mean, that makes sense. And like you said, unlike the other owner, he laid out a plan and he's working that plan. I mean, I think it was known before the season that there was no intention to move on from Ron mid-season. Like, it was going to be, they were going to ride this thing out this way, and in 2024 it was going to be a different story. So
Reggie, what's your take on Adam Peters so far?
Okay, let me just wrap up with the Josh Harris thing. Josh was asked about it after, I think it was after he had fired Ron, and he basically said that he told Ron that he would do that, and he was a man of his word to stick to that. So he never had any intention, despite what any of the fans thought. So he had no intentions of letting Ron go mid-season. So I as a man to a man, I can appreciate that. In terms of the Adams Peter hire, I tell a lot of people, I watch football. I can tell you a lot about players. What I can't tell you about the other people. So the GMs and the offensive coordinators and some of the people that make our teams go. I'm not an expert on that. So with that being the case, all I knew were who some of the hot up and coming names of assistant GMs of that nature, or even just GMs in general. And Adams Peters was one of those candidates. And I was okay with anyone that was going to come to us from someone that's been in a winning organization. So whether that be someone that has seen the Philadelphia Eagles, how they built their deal, the San Francisco 49ers, or any place where there's been success. And again, you come back to Adam Peters. And so with Adam Peters being the big name, and all of the people in the football circles kept saying Adam Peter. So I'm like, well, if he's the best guy out there, then hopefully we can get him. So when we did get him, I was ecstatic because we got what was universally understood as the best candidate on the market. So when we got him, I said, hey, I'm cool with it. I trust it, and I'm ready to roll. And I think we were talking about it a little bit before, and we'll get into it. And I was telling Derek, I said, I trust Adam Peters to do what he's going to do. And so therefore, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt to do and make any decision he has, and trust him until he gives me a reason not to.
I think the one thing that jumped out at me when Peters was hired, and continues to jump out at me, and it also jumped out at me, I know we're going to talk about Quinn in a minute, but he really wanted to be in DC with the Harris group. And that's not something we've had really, at least not, I mean, I know it's early, but both of those guys, that was the biggest thing that came through, is how excited they were to be here. And we know why we haven't had that in the past, unless Absolutely. It was about the paycheck. But that to me is a totally different thing. I mean, and I don't know if you guys noticed this, but when Peters was giving his opening remarks, it sounded like he won an Oscar, man. It sounded like he won the lottery, and he was thanking everyone, that got him to Washington, D.C. So that just kind of blew me away.
Yeah.
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 And I would piggyback on the Adam Peters. It is, you look back at the last few years where we've been quarterback starved, and we can't get any of the free agent quarterbacks to even consider Washington. Some of them were glad that they didn't end up working out. But we couldn't even get in the rumor mill, much less anything else. They weren't even using us to gain more money somewhere else, So that goes to tell you where the NFL players and anybody of quality viewed landing in Washington. And Harris, Peters, and Quinn, I think are quickly changing it. I mean, you got to win to perpetuate it, but the wave is moving in the right direction.
You
Yeah,
remember
absolutely.
that poll they did? I think they did it this season of the players to rank all the different aspects of NFL franchises.
F minus.
Yeah, we were like, we were. I mean, dead last, almost in every category. I think trainer. We liked our weight room guys or
Yeah.
trainers, but we can't be bottom, the worst in the league in every category. But that's kind of what happens when you get the karma and the rep that we've had. Is it just tarnishes everything. Nobody wants to come anywhere near it.
And to further your point, John, the fact that Adam Peters was sought after by several teams, and he did the interview with Washington, and if you recall, he canceled all the other interviews. He hadn't gotten the job yet, but he went ahead and canceled all the other interviews. So you can make the argument that he probably had a good idea of where he was going, but the fact was he took the one interview, his first interview, canceled the rest, and again, it furthers your point of this is where he wanted to be. So at this point, man, I love that phrase from Mike Tomlin. We want volunteers and not prisoners. And so the fact that we didn't have to buy our general manager or having to buy our head coaches and overpay for free agents, the tide is starting to turn, and it starts with Josh Harris and now Adam Peters. So absolutely, I love it, man.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I brought up on our previous podcast that it excites me the most about Adam Peters is this guy is coming from an organization that traded up to get a quarterback, took a guy last in the draft, and he sat there and he watched the benefits of not letting draft position skew your ability to manage your depth chart. How many franchises would have put all their eggs in one basket with Trey Lance? And Brock Purdy would have just been a practice squad,
right?
Scout team quarterback.
Simply because of where he was drafted.
Simply because of where they were drafted.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they traded up for Trey Lance, and they thought that they realized then it wasn't working, and they decided to move on. And then they saw this other kid who was capable, and they didn't panic. They didn't go out and draft another quarterback early in the first round to try to make up for their miss. And now he's leading them literally to playing in a Super Bowl in 5 days. So
yeah,
I think that is an experience that a lot of other GMs don't get. And I'm not saying that means that Sam Howell's going to be the guy, but what it does tell me is that if Sam Howell isn't the guy, it ain't going to have nothing to do with his draft position or who's coming up in the upcoming draft. It's going to be because they haven't seen what they need to see from him. You know what I mean? And he's not just going to be cast away as a previous regime guy.
Right.
So,
well, Ken, it's funny because Ken talks about that quite a bit, and about how if you don't hit on your player, you can't be afraid to be able to cut bait and move on. And we've seen that happen during the RG3 era, and Ken can touch on it. I mean, don't let me speak for you, Ken, but you can talk about all the times you mentioned that.
Yeah, and I think to go back and give. I think this is important for any team. If I'm going to go ahead and give Ron Rivera some credit, remember Dwayne. He did the same thing with Dwayne Haskins, right? Dwayne Haskins came in. It wasn't his guy, but he gave him every opportunity to be the guy. Saw he wasn't. Instead of just letting him sit on the bench. Now, granted, Dwayne Haskins was a knucklehead during COVID and went to a strip club and everything, but he had no problem letting them go. And that was a good choice because those quarterbacks that you just keep on hanging on, they're an anchor, right? They're dragging you down. Just cut your losses and move on, especially at quarterback more than any other position. I mean, Carolina, well, I'll go back to Ron Rivera. Not that I'm sitting here trying to praise Ron Rivera, but he did it with Cam Newton. Carolina had just selected the guy out of Notre Dame with the #1 pick. Didn't turn out. The very next year, they went from one first-round quarterback to the next first-round quarterback in Cam Newton.
Jimmy Clausen? Are you thinking Clausen?
Yes, that's who I'm thinking. That's who I'm thinking of too.
Yeah. So it's again when you know he's not the guy, cut bait and move on.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the next logical step, because it was a major talking point, was, and I almost don't even want to talk Ben Johnson because ultimately he's not here, but there's so much surrounding Ben Johnson. I am curious to see what you guys think of it. And like local media for the first 3 days after that whole thing went down was, oh, they whiffed, they failed to get their guy. Clearly this isn't as good of a destination as we thought, blah. Well, the narrative's changed, but still, do you feel like that, or are you on the same side I am? And I'll let you answer before I totally say my side, so I don't lead the witness. But I'm curious, what do you guys think about Ben Johnson?
Well, I'll try to keep mine short. So as I mentioned earlier, prior to us needing a head coach and everyone talking about the up and coming candidates, I didn't know much about Ben Johnson other than seeing him on Hard Knocks, right? And not knowing the depths of his offense and the philosophy of his offense. He was just another up and coming name. So between him, Mike McDonald, and all of these other guys, they were just coordinators. I was of the opinion, as I said earlier, whatever Adam Peters decides is the best head coach, then that's who I'm going to roll with. What I didn't like was the fact that I had never heard anyone in the organization, including some of the reporters that I tend to trust, and I'm going to start with John Quinn. Mm-hmm. No one ever said Ben Johnson was our guy except for the fans, some of the local and some of the national media. But John Quinn and even Adam Schefter kept saying that's not a foregone conclusion. So when the Ben Johnson thing didn't happen, I wasn't disappointed because I'm like, they never told us. And when I say they, the organization never told us that Ben Johnson was their #1 target. They just kept quiet and just let the national media just run with this whole theory that Ben Johnson was our #1 target. So was I upset or disappointed? Not at all. I just said, okay, well, I guess Ben Johnson doesn't want to be a head coach, at least not in Washington, and that's okay. And if it's not Ben Johnson, then who is it? Now, the process took a little longer than I actually thought it would take because Josh Harris said it's going to be a rapid but thorough process. So it went a little longer than I thought. But at the end of the day, I was like, hey, man, whoever they pick, I'm good with it.
I'm in.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
You go, Ken. Go ahead.
Okay. The part that concerned me wasn't that Ben Johnson didn't become our next head coach. The concerning part was whether it was him backing out or other coaches getting their jobs. Was Washington going to end up with the scraps, right? And so that was the concerning part that bothered me is I don't, we went after and got the GM that we wanted. I'm not saying we didn't, but initially I was concerned of are we not getting the guy that we want? Reggie and I are both in Dallas. So, we see the work that Dan Quinn does with the team. We see how he's perceived by the team, by the area. And so I wasn't overly excited initially. It was almost like the Ron Rivera hire. It was like, okay, I'll give you kind of a polite clap, but it wasn't overexcitement. As I've been able to sit here and absorb it and pull it in, I'm like, Dan Quinn was not a bad hire at all. Not a bad hire. But
No,
it,
but
it was
what were your thoughts
it,
on the Ben Johnson though, Ken? He's talking about Ben Johnson.
yeah, but with Ben Johnson, it was kind of the, I know he's a hot commodity, and I'm not saying he's not worth it, but I didn't see all of it. I liked that he was young. I liked the offense that they put in, but it was like a quick snapshot window, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm just gonna say I don't know about Ben Johnson. Hopeful if he was coming, I'm gonna cheer him on and everything. But I was just, there wasn't a coach out there going into it that I was throwing my hat in and going, that's my guy, that's my guy. Some guys interested me, but nobody that I was all in on across the board at head coach, I should say.
How about you guys? What
I
did you guys
wasn't
think of the Ben
upset.
Johnson?
I wasn't upset about when we, lost Ben Johnson and he bowed out. And I'll tell you why, because I don't know if you guys have ever had this where you had a big job opportunity, you went through the process, it was a big step up, but you just, as it got closer and closer to the start date, you just had something in you that it's like, it doesn't feel right. It's one thing to get the job. It's another thing to do the job. And I bailed the day before I was supposed to start a big job, and I just didn't feel right about it. So I don't hold anything against him for reaching that point. And I'm definitely in the we dodged a bullet camp, because the absolute worst thing would be to have a guy come on board as your head coach and he himself doesn't feel like it's the right role or isn't 100% bought in. Now, I was upset when McDonald didn't, because that was my guy. I feel like McDonald he's like a defensive Sean McVay. He's that smart, and he's got that fiery disposition. Like, I think he is a leader. I think he's going to do really well in Seattle. And I had an inside, Derek and I have an inside source who knows the McDonald's, who was feeding us information the whole time he's coming. He wants to come. His wife really wants to stay in this area.
Man.
Got ties to the organization.
Apparently it came apparently she was totally distraught, like to the point of that because she had her heart set on Washington.
He's probably got some recovery work to do with his wife. But anyway, that one hurt a little bit because
she's a former Redskinette.
Yeah. Right. And I knew that.
So that one bothered me more than Ben Johnson by far. But then I kind of came around to what Ken was talking about, that, and I know we're gonna transition into Quinn here. I don't know if we're doing it right now or not, but
might as well.
Well, I want to hear what Derek thought about Quinn, Ben Johnson first.
All right, it's coming out now that apparently teams got spooked based on his number, that he was asking for way too much. What was that? 2 months ago, his agent leaked out that their asking price would be $15 million a year or something stupid, which isn't going to ever happen for a first-time head coach. Let's just be honest. On top of that, then now there's poofling in both directions where he didn't like the front office because he felt they were too basketball oriented and too confident in their abilities, or the ownership group, and apparently it came out that he was a terrible. The interview bombed and there's all kinds of stuff going back and forth. And so now I'm with you guys. I think we dodged a bullet. I was intrigued by Ben Johnson. My first choice going into the offseason was Bobby Slowick. And I only say that because I wanted an offensive-minded coach. I've said this multiple times. And the only reason I want an offensive-minded coach is because if a defensive-minded coach gets hired and he brings in a kick-ass offensive coordinator, in 2 years, he's got to find another offensive coordinator because the guy's going to get a head coaching job. Whereas if an offensive coach comes in, generally they put their offense in, and then they're running the offense with a pipeline of people that goes from offensive coordinator to quarterbacks coach to then passing game coordinator to tight ends to whatever, where if that offensive coordinator gets hired away, there's 15 other people in the building that are in your bubble that can just naturally become cogs in the wheel that you can continue moving up. That's my only reason that I wanted on offense, that I would quote unquote prefer offense over defense. at the end of the day, I just want to win damn football games. I don't give a damn
Sir.
where your predisposition is. And if our offensive coordinator gets hired away in 2 years, well, guess what that means? It means we were winning football games and we've been pretty damn successful. So I'm okay with it. You know what I mean? We'll deal with that problem when it becomes a problem, if it becomes a problem, because that's a good problem to have. So, I think we dodged a bullet. I think he seems like at least what's been coming out is not flattering at all. With him changing his mind, with the fact that the team didn't even find out about it. They found out about it on Twitter and then got a text message from a couple of hours later stating that this is what his plan was. And it's not a great look one way or the other. I don't blame him if he decided that, you know what, this just isn't for me. It's not a right fit. You know, that's part of an interview. The interview is interviewing the team as much as it is interviewing the head coach. You know, I learned that a long time ago in my professional life that when I walk into an interview, I want to make sure it's going to work for me as much as it's going to work for them. So that's fine. I think we ended up doing well with Quinn. I think he's got shades of Dan Campbell a little bit in his presser. You know, you listen to his press conference. I didn't quite want to run through a wall, but I could see how players really would buy into him. And I've been hearing nothing but positives about Dan Quinn since he's come here. So, yeah, we dodged a bullet with Ben. Well, we missed out on maybe another opportunity. I loved Mike McDonald because all that guy does is just shove it in Kyle Shanahan offensive faces, which, you know, is a third of the league now. So if you can find that, then I think you're in good shape. But I still think ultimately we came away with a guy that's going to set us up to be successful, more successful than we've been in the past. If for no other reason than the process, you know what I mean? I'm just excited about the process. Owner picked the GM, GM and owner found their head coach. Head coach is now building his staff, and then they're going to work with the GM and figure out their coordinator situation or their quarterback situation, which is the most exciting thing because we haven't run it the right way in 25 years.
Right. And I'll just circle back just real quick here to say that I think a lot of people were disappointed because everyone thought that Ben Johnson, the quote unquote hottest, coordinator on the market, and when that didn't happen, there was disappointment. But I think the majority of the people had an issue with the way he handled it. Ben Johnson changing his mind, he had every right to absolutely do that. I think where I had a problem with Ben Johnson was just simply to the point that you made there, Derek, was how he did it. He could have just allowed them to come in, go through the process. Hey, I know you guys may be coming for me primarily, but still you got Aaron Glenn here. I'm going to help my guy Aaron Glenn get an interview. Or you let them know this before they come. But to do it in the manner in which he did, I think rubbed a lot of people wrong. Even people like us who is okay with him changing his mind. It was the method in which he notified the team, and that was kind of bush league in my personal opinion in the way he did that.
But to your point, how would he felt if the team went on Twitter and said, yeah, we're not interested in Ben Johnson. And then when he was supposed to have an interview with them and then ended up waiting a couple hours in Adam Peters' text messages, Ben Johnson, and said, hey, Ben, it's been a pleasure. We're going in a different direction. I mean, that's some shit Dan Snyder would have done. You know what I mean? Like that's something that's something that might happen in Carolina in that ownership group, because that's not, so that you're right. That's where my frustration lies.
So I'm going to say something bold. I don't think it would have been Ben Johnson, even if he'd done that interview. I haven't heard anyone say like they offered him the job. I've heard them say that they made an offer to McDonald. I have not heard anyone say they made anything close to an offer to Ben Johnson. I think he did an interview well, and I don't think once they talked to McDonald and they had Dan Quinn that they really liked, I don't think he was going to be the guy. I really don't get that feeling.
Yeah. And they were going to still talk to Aaron Glenn, right? So they still, were going to Detroit to talk to Aaron Glenn. But not that I want you guys to divulge all your insider information, but what can you share now after the fact that you knew about the Mike McDonald situation, other than his wife, wanted to stay in the area and really wanted the Washington job?
What we were hearing from a former board member was that and I mean, they have close ties to that family, was that we actually heard early on that it was going to be like a package deal. Like we might get, I can't remember the guy's name, but we might get like the assistant GM from the Ravens and McDonald as a package. That's what we were hearing initially. Then that kind of fell away once we found out who they were interviewing for GM. But basically what we heard is he wants
it was Eric DeCosta's the sorry, not to interrupt, John. I was trying to put his name out there and now I can't remember what it was.
But we basically heard that he wanted it. He wanted it badly. About the ties of his family. His wife's family is in the DMV. It's close to his mentors and peers in Baltimore. All of that stuff. So I don't know, and I tried not to push it like you wouldn't with anyone who's kind of giving you a little bit of information, but I believe it came down to that 6-year contract, and because nobody makes a decision that like upsets their spouse without there being a really good reason. And I think probably being the primary breadwinner of the family, he's probably looking at a 6-year contract for a head coach is kind of it's not totally unheard of, but unless you're, John Gruden, it just doesn't happen for a first-time head coach. I think it's pretty unheard of.
It's Joe Horitz was the name.
Yes.
He was the director of player personnel.
And even if he doesn't, not that I'm wishing him any bad luck here, but even if he doesn't stay the entire 6 years, they still have to pay it, right? So that's the importance of having that 6th year, that whether he coaches all of them or not, they still have to pay him based on that contract. So good for him. Good for him.
And I think that's another difference between the Harris Group and Dan Snyder, at least in previous, maybe not the tail end of Dan's career where he was, getting a little, watching his dollars and cents, I guess is the way to put it. We would have just paid him whatever the hell he wanted to get him here. The Harris Group, I think they could want somebody really badly, but it has to make sense to everybody. And the thing is too, you just hired Adam Peters. What are you going to do? You're going to pay a guy who's never been a head coach before more than you're paying your GM or giving him a longer contract. It starts to get pretty dicey at some point. So,
well, and there was, I guess, reports that have since come out that, you guys are saying McDonald wanted the job. I don't know where he was on the list for the Josh Harris group, but supposedly that they were also looking for someone who had a little bit of leadership, but they wasn't sure they wanted a rookie head coach because they had a rookie GM.
Yeah. And
to then have a rookie head coach. So it was rumored that they wanted someone with maybe some previous head coaching experience.
So
I was going
to say one more thing, Reggie, since you asked the question. The one kind of thing that came out from my friend is that Seattle was more welcoming, or I think the sense was they wanted him more. And I wonder if it wasn't that, because I've heard Josh Harris say about 150 times and hold them accountable. You know what I'm saying? He's always talking about and he even in Peters' opening presser, he said, and we're going to hold them accountable for results. So I wonder if the interview didn't have a lot of that kind of language. Like, in other words, we'd love to make you an offer, but you need to understand what our expectations are. And I think that might have been I'm just speculating, but maybe that just put pressure on him that he felt like he wasn't getting from the folks.
Seattle recruited him a little bit better, is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. That's fair.
So ultimately we ended up with Quinn. Ken, you started talking about Quinn, and now I am curious, what is your direct thought on Quinn beyond just comparing him to Johnson?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, if you talk about Dan Quinn, you gotta turn your hat around. Okay. That's number one. If you don't know that already, he's an old school reverse flip your hat guy. But whether Dan Quinn excited you or not, when you look at his record, his track record, and he's just been successful everywhere he goes. Up in Seattle, went to the Super Bowl, Legion of Doom, went to Atlanta, took them to the Super Bowl. Comes to Dallas, and that they, while a lot of times Dallas's offense gets all the press, it's the defense that has been the better part the last few years. If there's been a dominating side of the ball in Dallas, it's been definitely more so on the defense than it has been the offense. The one thing against Dan Quinn is he's had two big games that didn't go well. But everybody forgets about all the good games that he's had to get him to those points, right? And I don't know how much you all paid attention to the press conference on him. He said a lot of good things. The one thing that I truly valued in a coach that's been around for a while is he talked about his defense in Seattle and his defense in Atlanta, and he realized, I can't keep running this defense the exact same. The offense are changing, and my defense needs to change with it. And so he did, and that brought him the success in Dallas. That is very telling of a person, of a coach, because you keep running that play or that defense that got you to the dance. I don't care. It got me there before. It's going to get me there again. And people do that to a fault. So, like I said, of his hour speech, when he talked about that, more than anything else he said, a lot of it was just, coach, yeah, I'm going to say all the right things. So when he talked about that, that was the thing that made me go, this truly might be the guy that we want here in Washington.
Yeah, the thing that struck me, and I thought the press conference, I thought he knocked it out of the park. I did feel like at one point, like, I think Josh Harris wanted to turn to him and say, we gave you the job. You don't have to interview anymore. I felt like he was interviewing. But just the humility, and also to me, the fire, like you could tell he was struggling not to use foul language, which I'm all about the foul language anyway. I'd be fine with it.
Right.
Like when he said he's going to use foul language, I'm like, oh, here we go. I was in the Marine Corps, man. I know how to use them.
He was definitely holding back. You can tell he was holding back. Not just his language, but I think even some of the energy.
I loved that one of the big themes of that presser was all about the identity, that whole explosive and physical thing. Because we haven't had that. We had it for like 15 minutes during the 2012 season, at least on offense. We kind of had an identity where, no one knew how to stop us on offense, and we put the fear of God into defenses. But we really haven't had, I don't know what our identity has been for the last 25 years. I really don't.
Confused.
I don't know, but
that
really got my attention.
If we don't know what we're doing, they won't know what we're doing either.
And then the last thing I'll say about the presser was, and this is one of the reasons why I'm not really worried about like Dan Quinn fixing the franchise and making us a perennial winner. I don't think he views it as Dan Quinn. I think he views it as Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt and Kliff Kingsbury. And I think that's where he's at now, is he's like, I can't, and he said it a couple times, I can't do it all myself, and I'm going to screw it up if I try. That made me feel just, I don't know, I kind of drank some of the Kool-Aid on that front.
One of the best things that I've heard out of him was that he literally took ownership of the downfall of the Falcons, and he said, I don't think he said this in his presser, but he said it elsewhere. He said, where I made my biggest mistake in Atlanta was after Kyle left, thinking I could handle the offense. Thinking that I was smart enough and good enough to take that over and still be successful. So I think one of the biggest things about him that we're going to see is that he truly analyzes himself as much as he analyzes everything around him. I believe he did say that was one in his presser. That was one of the things that he did, is that he brought other people in to basically scout him and tell him what they thought of him and what he did wrong and everything, as opposed to my system is right, my system works, my system, I'm the head coach, I'm the smartest guy in the room, or at least I have the most power, blah blah blah. Like, I think that's the biggest difference, is that guy, he's the kind of guy, and he's a lot more Joe Gibbs than he is Ron Rivera. And the way that I mean by that is, if this team starts out 0-5, you better believe game 6, there's going to be something different. You know what I mean? Whereas with Bieniemy and Rivera, for that matter, over the last couple seasons, we're not seeing adjustments until midway late into the season. So I think that's one. Dan Quinn will be analyzing this team week in and week out with the people that are important, to say, where do we need to adjust? What do we need to change? This isn't, why didn't this work? And if it isn't, did it not work because we need to get better at it? Or did it not work because it's just not going to work and we need to evolve into something different?
Yeah. Well, I think most people would agree that the Dan Quinn, killed it at the presser, right? And I know we felt pretty good about Ron's presser, and we've seen other pressers that have been pretty good. But Dan Quinn, to you guys' point, hit a home run. The thing that jumped out to me was the fact that he said a lot of the things that I think plagued this organization for many, many years. And that is, he talked about repeatedly being in lockstep with Adam Peters. Everything that he talked about was working with Adam Peters, right? He
shared
constantly
vision,
was
right?
Shared vision, being in lockstep, being in alignment. And, and we've heard that even when Josh took over, we heard it when Adam Peters was hired. And then we continue to hear that same theme when Dan was hired. I like the fact, it goes back to the whole coaching hire. And I know a lot of people wanted the big name or the young up and coming, but I like the fact that we have a guy that has, as he put it, did a 360 on himself, had a go at it, realized his shortcomings, and decided, as he said in his press conference, I think I wrote it down somewhere, if I get another shot. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. He knew how he would go about it if he got a second chance, because of that being able to do a self-evaluation of himself. And so we're getting a better version of Dan Quinn than what Atlanta got, because he's already done and he's already made the mistakes in Atlanta. So the fact that he's going to come to Washington and make those corrections, along with, by all intents and purposes, what everyone has said, we got the best GM candidate in the market. He's going to work with that guy. And the thing about what Dan said that really hit home with me was, Dan said, I got one interest. He just want to coach. Dan's not trying to come in like probably what Harbaugh, Vrabel, Belichick, and some of these guys who are going to be coaches and then do a little bit more. Dan says, I want to keep the main thing, and I want to be able to just simply coach. He's going to let Adam, he's going to work with Adam, get all the players they need. But at the end of the day, I just want to coach. And he laid out, I wish I had the quote here, but he laid out what his vision is of what a coach is. And he said that's all he wants to do. And the fact that he then went on to say that I'm going to take players, someone would come to him and say, well, this guy's not good at this or that. He says, but I want to know what he's good at. And then we put him in position to do that, because what have we historically done with players here in Washington? We bring guys. Absolutely. And what did Dan say? Dan said, let's put him in the best spot to succeed.
Yeah.
And he named a few players. And the one that stuck out to me was Bennett, Martellus Bennett's brother, that was in Seattle. I think the guy was a late 5th round pick. And if you know, Bennett ended up being a perennial Pro Bowl player because he took what he did well and they put him in a position when he was in Seattle, and the guy just made plays. So we're now going to either take the roster we have. He's going to put those guys in a chance to succeed. And then when we draft players. So I'm sitting here like, this is music to my ears, man. I love it. And I love hearing it. And then I was like, I'm all excited. So just like John, I ain't gonna lie, man. I was drinking the Kool-Aid.
Well, Yeah, and you look at where he has gone. When I talk again about Seattle, Atlanta, Dallas, I think there's some talent on defense here, but who's our stud? I'm not talking about in contract. I'm not talking about in where you were drafted. I'm talking about performance. Who's the stud on our defense? Right? We talked
Interior
about
D
all these
line.
first rounds, but yeah, but I guarantee you next year, don't know who it's going to be. Might be Quan Martin, might be Jamin Davis, right?
Yeah.
That everybody's been waiting on. There's going to be one or two people. It might be a rookie, it might be a free agent,
Mm-hmm.
but there's going to be people that everybody that we play against, and that all the fans are going to know that guy's for real. That guy's for real on defense, and we haven't had that since Dexter Manley, London Fletcher. We're going back. And it's not because we haven't had talent here. It's
Coaching.
It's coaching and putting them in the right position and doing a scheme to funnel defenses in a direction, or funnel an offensive direction that frees up your guys to do what they do best. And Dan Quinn has again proven it everywhere that he's gone that there's going to be a couple players that stand out that haven't in the last couple of years.
I agree with that. Because again, it's not because we don't have talent on this team, but I think these guys are going to pull that talent. This is, and again, maybe because I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, I feel like this is going to be somewhat similar to, if you guys remember when Jeff Fisher was out with the Rams and they were terrible. He got fired. They brought in Sean McVay, and immediately nothing changed other than the coach. They still had, that's the year he had Goff. Nothing changed. And all of a sudden he became boy wonder. And then I think after that is when they ended up changing over and going with Matthew Stafford. But I think that we're going to see a change in this team probably immediately in terms of our players. I don't know what that's going to equate to record-wise, but to Dan's point, we're going to be a physical team, and I think we're going to see a totally different – we're going to look like an NFL team, I believe, every Sunday, win or lose.
Man.
Well, and again, I'm going to simplify things back to the dejected fan that I am. The process was done correctly. So I'm not saying that Dan Quinn's not going to work out, but guess what? If Dan Quinn doesn't work out, he's also not the GM. He's not the guy that's picking the color of the pants we wear on Sundays. He's not the guy, he's not everything else in the franchise that if they decide in 3 years to move on from him, we have to reset the entirety of the franchise. That's, you know what I mean? Like, it's just an enlightening experience to go through it this way, to the point where the system has been developed and it's been built and the process has been put together well enough, and the head coach only has to worry about coaching football games.
Yes.
And
well, I like to piggyback on that, because over the last couple years, Reggie and I have gotten into some heated conversations about who's to blame, right? Who's to blame for this, or who's to blame? Is it Snyder? Is it Rivera? Is it who? Because to your point, who has all the control? Who's stepping on whose feet, right?
Mhm.
I have my opinion. Reggie has his opinion, but we know ownership is the ownership. The GM is the GM. The head coach is the head coach. The coordinators are the coordinators. Everybody's got their line. Everybody's got their role. And not that anybody's not going to work with everybody else and give their opinion and influence, but the buck stops at every single one of those places for the people that are responsible for those roles in that job.
Yeah, and ultimately,
we look like an organization, guys. We look like an official organization,
right? And ultimately, how much can you even believe in what we've seen over the last couple of years when you have so little confidence in the people that are guiding them and training them and coaching them? But to your point on the coordinators, Ken, this what was Harrison's term? Thorough but quick.
Rapid but thorough.
Rapid but thorough. Went rapid but thorough GM. We had to take our time head coach, and then rapid but thorough kicked right back in for coordinators because it was within 36 hours that 48 hours. We were talking about, Kingsbury and Joe Whitt. Now, admittedly, I know nothing about Joe Whitt other than the fact that it seems like his secondary has a nose for the football. So I'll give him that. And in Kingsbury, it looks like that guy, he has his name attached to a lot of premium quarterbacks. Now, do you want to give him credit or are you just attaching it? I don't know. But I think Kingsbury is a violent shove of an offense into 2024. Like, I think the offense is going to take a massive evolution towards a current day offense. What do you guys think?
Go ahead, John.
Well, you heard, I don't know if you heard or not, but Pat Mahomes was asked questions about Kingsbury out at, as he's getting ready to be in another Super Bowl. And he just raved about him. And basically in a nutshell, what he said was that what he loved about Kingsbury is that he didn't try to put him in this box. Like, this is what a quarterback does. This is how you play the quarterback position. He just tried to help him be better at what he did well. So he didn't try to make him into a pocket passer or try to contain what his natural instincts were. He just made him better at doing the things that he already did pretty well. So, and I just heard a little blurb from Matt Ryan talking about Dan Quinn saying good things, but Baker Mayfield, Davis Webb, Patrick Mahomes, Case Keenum, Johnny Manziel, and Caleb Williams. That's a pretty good list of young quarterbacks that you helped. I mean, I don't think anyone could ultimately help Johnny Manziel, but
well, the Johnny Manziel he helped was in college, not in the NFL, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a pretty impressive list.
Yeah, I think I really like Kliff Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator. I don't want him as my head coach, but I think if he's your offensive coordinator and that's the role that he maintains, I like it. I think he's got the innovative offense that is challenging. It's different than what NFL teams, a lot of NFL teams run. So so the teams that you play have got to make a shift, right? A lot of times it's just some little subtleties from one team to another team. It's going to be more than a subtlety with Kingsbury's offense that he runs. I think there was a perception also that he just airs it out like the enemy did. I went and looked at his years at Arizona, and he's at about 45-55, about 45% run, 55 passing. In today's NFL, that is right on par.
To evolve on that, PFF apparently broke it down, or somebody broke it down, where it was neutral down in distances. So it was taking out when the team's down by 14, it's taking out 3rd and 31. It's taking those things out. Neutral distances, he's 51% run, 49% pass.
And just to give a little bit more support for what Ken said, their offense was pretty good in Arizona. I mean, you had a rookie quarterback, but they actually were top 10 top 10 in rushing yards 3 out of the 4 seasons he was there. They were only top 10 in passing one season, the season they went to the playoffs. But I mean, so they had a good rushing attack with the air raid offense. And he had no offensive coordinator in Arizona. It was all Kingsbury. I mean, I'm sure he had coaches, but he was calling the plays.
For me, when I first heard about the Kliff Kingsbury, just human nature, I immediately thought about the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. And the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals didn't really excite me when I thought about it. But then you have to remember he's being hired for his style of offense and his work with the quarterbacks that John was naming. So he has his history with all these guys in college. And then, of course, working with Kyler. So then immediately I thought, okay, well, let me look at some of his stuff here. And so to your point, John, you mentioned about them rushing, but I can't overlook the fact that what went into them to be top 10 in rushing 3 of those years was Kyler Murray. It's kind of like Baltimore Ravens using Lamar Jackson as part of their run game. Well, at that point, that's what they call stealing yardage, right? And when you have a guy that can do that, it helps. But from a traditional running, I don't know how to subtract Kyler Murray's yardage from that as part of their rushing. But nonetheless, he was clearly willing to run the ball, and which is good. I think we all were screaming for a little bit more of that for our team this past year. And but total offensive ranks, rushing and passing, with the exception of his first year and his last year, they were 6th and 8th respectively in total offense. So that included their rushing and their passing. So I said, okay, to Ken's point, Kliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator, I can live with it. The head coach, I'm not sure that I'm ready for him to be our head coach, but as a coordinator, to be working hand in hand where he's only focused on the offense, and oh, by the way, combining that with, if we end up picking a quarterback at number 2, he's shown that he can work and design an offense around young quarterbacks, a la Patrick Mahomes. He's not going to force the young quarterback to be a certain kind of way. He's going to probably try to work with the strength of that quarterback as they continue to develop him and turn him into a true NFL quarterback, a la Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, that's what Baltimore did. They used his strength early on, and over the years, they've worked with him to become more of a dual threat than just the guy just out there just running around and slinging it on what they call plays that kind of break down a little bit. So
Off schedule.
I kind of like it, off schedule plays. So I like it. I've come around to, I'm like, okay, I can dig the Kliff Kingsbury.
The other thing people don't ever talk about is, if you're looking at his pro experience, the guy's in a division. He's in the NFC West with, just the 49ers, the Rams,
And
with
the
Sean
Seahawks.
McVay, and the bottom feeder, Seattle. I mean, it's not like, that is a tough division.
Valid point.
And he did not embarrass himself, even as a head coach, I don't think.
Yeah. It shows here that he finished 4th in his first year. So he finished last in the division. The second year they finished 3rd. The third year they finished 2nd. That was when they went to the playoffs. And then the last year was when they finished last in the division again. And that's what ultimately got him fired. So, but yeah, I'm okay with Kliff.
And Kyler was out Kyler was injured that year also.
Yep. Kyler did get hurt. They finished 4-13 that year. So yeah, man, I'm okay with it. And the Joe Whitt situation, I don't know much about Joe Whitt other than he's been with Dan. So I like
he's been
Atlanta.
with Dan for a long time.
Right. So the continuity and for Joe Whitt to be a conduit of how Dan Quinn likes things and how he thinks, I like that. So that continuity. I was really, really hoping that they would bring over Al Harris to be the secondaries guy, but I read today that the likelihood of that is slim, and the reason being the way the league works, with the only way, since Al is under contract,
it wouldn't be a
promotion. Cowboys. He can only come over if it's a promotion, and you're right. So since it's not a promotion, he's probably not coming. So
right, because you're not gonna give him assistant head coach, secondary coach, or
right.
Like since he's not the DC, it would be hard to finagle that a little bit.
Yeah,
Since you guys are down in Dallas, we need you to finagle some kind of a scheme to get John Fossil, their special teams coordinator, up here, because that guy.
He's something else, isn't he?
Like, maybe we can make him assistant head coach, special teams coordinator / assistant head coach.
He's a strange guy too.
One thing, I don't know if you guys noticed this, just to circle back around and tie a bow on this, but did you notice that Adam Peters got GM, but he did not get VP of player personnel? Did you guys pick up on that? So I guess my thought process is that he'll run GM, and if somebody wants to come to him with a promotion, we have a promotion in the bag that we can block it and boost the pay and keep him here if things are working out.
Okay.
I could.
I did not notice that, but I just assumed he would have all duties, such as that. It wasn't in the title, but it was just an assumption I had.
But if you look at it, I don't think we have an assistant head coach on offense or defense.
Not
So
yet.
I'm watching this, the way this thing is, this pyramid is starting to unveil, and I'm wondering, to your point with Harris, are we leaving these opportunities where if somebody tries to come poach somebody, we've got a promotion to bring them in and boost the pay and keep them here? I mean, like this is where I have been concerned, because now in the past we don't see where we're thinking 3 to 5 years down the road where, hey, if we're good, we want to keep the band together. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like
Oh,
we're
yeah.
not
Oh,
seeing
yeah.
that. Instead, we're using those titles to get somebody in the building. Now we're like reserving that Joker card, that Uno reverse card, where if we've got it in our pocket, where we can keep somebody in the building because they don't suck.
Yeah.
Don't you think part of it is though that it's the whole collaboration thing, where they don't want, like, I don't know if you guys thought about it, but when they made Eric Bieniemy the assistant head coach, I'm like, what? I mean, Jack Del Rio, regardless of what you think of him as a defensive coordinator, he's been a head coach in the NFL, like, repeatedly. And
Right.
I mean, I just think in a way it's like you can set yourself up to have a situation where coaches are like trying to clamor over each other, as almost like a competition kind of a thing, which I don't necessarily think that's a good thing. So I just wonder if we won't see anybody that as an assistant head coach. And that might even be why they don't want Adam Peters to be viewed as like Bruce Allen, the king of all he surveys. They want him kind of closer to the coaching tree, but I don't know. I could be totally.
Absolutely.
Well,
gentlemen,
either way, I like it. I like what they're doing so far.
Yep.
So I'm buying it all.
Where are you guys at 0 to 10 on the optimism scale right now?
Reg?
Just general optimism.
It's
ahead,
funny
Ken.
you should say this. It's funny you should say this because we always do every week. We do a what's your number on the games, and it's not your number of it's just it's nothing more than a confidence
It's a
level.
confidence number, right?
Yeah.
It's a confidence number, and anything above 5 is you think we're going to win. We might squeak it out, but yeah, go ahead. Just kind of piggyback that the way you set up that question was kind of the same thing. Go ahead, Reg.
What's your number, guys?
A little segment on our podcast. Oh man, at this point, I'm gonna say I'm at an 8 in terms of optimism. Now, I think we all, has been longtime fans, we all know that this is the offseason and we still have free agency in the draft and training camp, and a whole lot can happen between now and August and September. But as of right
Not
now,
a whole lot can happen. A whole lot is gonna happen.
It's gonna happen. And so, but I feel confident that we are laying the foundation for something special, right? As Dan Quinn said, we want to find our north, right? Whoever is going to take us, we're laying the foundation with the ownership, the GM, and head coach to start turning this thing where we can get back to being a respectable organization. So right now, my optimism is at an 8.
As I look at it, as we've talked about kind of from the beginning here, I really like our new ownership. And that's where it starts. I like the Adam Peters hire. I like the Dan Quinn hire. As you have time to chew it and evaluate it. The Kliff Kingsbury and Joe Whitt, I'm good with everything. Right now I'm good with all the way across the board there. We've got our free agency and everything going. But I'm one, as Reggie knows, man, I pump the brakes. And I pumped the brakes the last few years compared to 5, 6, 7 years ago. We are 100% trending in the right way, but I'm at it's going to come off as a negative, but I'm at a 6.5 just because I'm at a prove it point as a fan. I'm not leaving, but man, you pulled the rug out from under my feet way too many times, and somebody's sitting back and giggling while I'm laying on my back, in like in the cartoon. So I'm at a 6.5.
I think I'm with Reggie. I think I'm at an 8. But guess what? 2024 and 2025 are going to have almost no merit on the changing of that rating. And the reason being is because I'm not worried about 2024 right now. We're new ownership, new GM, new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. If you don't sign any of our free agents, we're turning over 35% of our roster. We have 22 players that are becoming free, 24 players becoming free agents going into next season. So to act like this is going to be a team that is expected to win 8 to 10 to 12 games is just unrealistic. But my point is, to piggyback on Ken a little bit, the moves that we're making now are going to pay dividends 3 to 5 to 10 years down the road now. Something that we have not looked at. So I'm at an 8 out of 10, but the 8 out of 10 doesn't mean I think we're going to win 80% of our games. It's that we're going to start seeing a process. We're going to start seeing a foundation built, like you said. We're going to start seeing moves and decisions that are made that don't only benefit the guy who's trying to save his job in the 4th year of a 5-year contract. They're going to benefit, hopefully, the team for the next 10 years. And that's where Peters is going to come into it. And that's where, to Reggie's point, you got to prove it now. Now you need to start making those decisions. Now I want to see the hard decision. Now I want to see you take the quarterback instead of the sure thing defensive end, when I was a full-on fan that was ready to take Chase Young, or vice versa. I want to, if you're that smart guy, pass on the quarterback and you take the wide receiver or the tackle that's going to be the all-pro for the next 9 years, and knowing that you can get your guy later. This is when you start to earn your paycheck. This is when you prove us as fans wrong, because we're just, myself, I'm just some fat guy watching the game on Sunday, hammering a bunch of beers, asking what the hell's wrong with the roster, right? I don't know what you know, so prove to me that you know more than I do at this point. So I'm an 8 out of 10 because I'm just excited that shit's going to get done right for a change.
That's what my optimism is, man. Go ahead, John.
I'm gonna go with 8 as well, just because I'm not very clever. But if they change the name to something better,
it's like a 9.5.
All the way up to a 9.7.
Oh man!
Did you guys notice? I got to ask you this really quickly as we close here. Did you guys notice that Harris did not use the
commanders
at this press conference
not
at all?
once?
I don't know if it means anything.
Go back and watch it. He says Washington football. He never says Commanders.
I did not.
I
wasn't paying attention. I wasn't paying that close attention, so it didn't register me. I think I was more glued into. I wanted to hear what Dan Quinn had to say, and I was ready for what the reporters was going to ask, right? Because they had their prepared speeches, so I was really curious to I was ready to get Josh off the mic. I want to hear Dan speak, and I want to hear what the questions were going to be asked.
So I think JP Finley stole my question. I posted a question on Twitter a couple hours before the press conference about asking Josh Harris, like, you've been really super involved in this whole process. Is this the point at which you kind of step back and remove yourself from it somewhat? And he asked it a little bit more politically appropriate than that. But I was excited because Harris actually immediately knew what he was really asking and said, yep, that's why I hired these guys. They're the football experts. So I was glad to hear that.
Yeah.
It's probably just my trauma from having Dan Snyder pulling the puppet strings for 25 years.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be different now, guys, and that's why I'm optimistic.
Right.
So we need folks to go check out your podcast, the Burgundy and Gold Knuckleheads, on YouTube, and I know you guys also are out there on all the audio pod carriers as well. Check it out, and We really appreciate both you guys, Ken and Reggie, for coming on. We got to do it again. We got to debate the quarterback situation at some point.
Absolutely, man. We appreciate you guys for having us, man. This was fun, and we'd love to do this again. We'll have to have you guys on with us as well, and certainly to get some more input and get you guys' thoughts on a lot of things, man. Because I when the season was ending, I told Ken I'm just excited about the off season. I don't know what it's going to look like. I just knew a lot of changes were coming, and I was hopeful for a lot of positive things. So I was just excited. So far to be able to get the GM. Now we got what I think most people have come around to realize we got a hell of a good head coach. Now what we're going to do with player acquisition, the draft, the free agency. I'm just excited about it all. And of course, we got the number 2 pick in the draft as of today, right?
It is going to be an intense 90 days. Like there's going to be a lot going on over the next 90 days.
We probably missed something while we were doing the pod.
I love it, man, and I'm here for it. So absolutely.
All right, boys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, and
Thank you,
we'll
boys.
catch up soon.
All right, guys, take
Sounds
care.
good.